Hello and welcome to the news at 7, where we get to the heart of the day's stories and communities across Scotland tonight. A call for John Swinney and Nicola Sturgeon to be investigated over failures at Glasgow's Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. The leader of Scottish Labour says that complications at the hospital were the biggest scandal in the history of the Scottish Parliament and that he believed a criminal act had taken place. We will hear from the father of a young woman whose death is among those being investigated. Also tonight, the plight of newly qualified teachers, with most no longer getting permanent jobs. They say they're stuck as supply teachers or having to leave the country for work. We will have the sport, as we always do, with Jane. What's coming up tonight, Jane?
Well, after another impressive win for Glasgow Warriors in the Champions Cup, we'll ask a former Scotland international who knows all about European club rugby success if the Scotsman side can go all the way.
And the famous crime writer who wants to make reading more appealing to children. Hello, I'm Amy Irons and welcome to the news at 7. The Scottish Labour leader is calling for John Swinney and Nicola Sturgeon to be investigated over failures at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow. It comes after NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde admitted that issues with the water system probably caused infections in child cancer patients after years of denying any link. Anna Sarwar says senior hospital figures and government ministers who were in post at the time should feel the force of the law. The father of a woman whose death is being investigated says the Health Board was warned for years about issues with the hospital's water system. Molly Cudahy's dad, John, spoke to our health correspondent Lisa Summers.
From Molly's perspective, I would say, which is emotionally disappointing, is the fact that the institutional words don't take into account the individual lives. There is no mention in these closing words of an apology to Molly. Molly doesn't feature in it. And despite the fact that she outlined to them in graphic detail the devastating impact of the waterborne bacteria and the lasting impact that it had on her, so much so that when Molly died last year, a lot of it is a consequence of the impact on her wee body all that time. Molly always recognised, and she said, that the clinicians saw Molly in her treatment, but the institution never saw. And so for them to take 6.5 years now to recognise it, the sad thing is that Molly's in her grave and she never got to read the words or to hear what they had to say. So for me, in acknowledging and the respect for the public inquiry that we've listened to, we'll have oral submissions. I just hope that the words of Molly, the other children and the families remain at the centre of these discussions, and that any recommendations or conclusions that come of it actually are lasting and meaningful.
For Molly, as you say, she was, so courageous to be able to speak out about the things that happened to her and to, in many ways, like fight for not just herself but for other families to have that kind of truth. And I don't know how you feel like, as a family, you've been through the most horrible loss over the past 4 or 5 months. Like for her not to be able to actually, hear the health board take a different view. Why could they not have done it sooner,
Absolutely, and I think that will remain the most emotionally challenging aspect throughout this, because we knew the harm that was being caused to the children. From 2018, when Molly first contracted the bacteria from the water, we knew the water system was contaminated. And as it appears, many others knew, but they would never ever recognise it, and they would never ever tell us that that was the case. That's all we wanted. We just wanted people to face up to what was ongoing and to take the steps to mitigate that risk, to not only to Molly but to the other children that come in. I acknowledge that there are now a change in leaders, but leadership needs to permeate through the whole organisation, and that change should be encouraged. I think it's because there's perhaps a change in leadership that we're now seeing a change in the narrative. Whilst I recognise the complexity of this public inquiry, I recognise that we have to do it right, and so the length of time has to reflect that. And it's not just about rushing towards an answer. I think we need to take our time. 6 years may be too long.
NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde issued a statement. It said the Health Board accepts that there is a causal connection between some infections suffered by patients, and it departs from its earlier submission in this regard, having heard all expert evidence. Well, as we mentioned, a political row is brewing over the alleged failings that led to infections at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. Here's what the Scottish Labour leader and the First Minister have said on the matter.
After 7 years, we're finally making progress. For 7 years, families have been lied to about what happened to their children. Staff have been bullied and life made difficult for them at their place of work, and the public have not been told the truth either. And so, yes, we've had some admission of wrongdoing from the Health Board, but I believe this is the biggest scandal in the history of the Scottish Parliament. I think this is a criminal act, and therefore there must be consequences.
The Health Board have obviously listened to the evidence that has been set out as part of the inquiry, which was set up by the SNP government. And the purpose of the inquiry was to get to the truth. And the inquiry has got to get to the truth to give satisfaction to the victims of what has happened in these particular cases. And the government set up the inquiry to do exactly that. And from the closing statements that have been publicised, from the work of the inquiry, and I don't want to prejudge the inquiry is still underway, it's got to come to its conclusions. But from the information that's been published, the evidence has had a significant effect on uncovering the truth as part of this inquiry.
Now, if you're a teacher or know someone who is, it might not surprise you to hear that many qualified teachers in Scotland are struggling to find permanent jobs. For some, it means spending years on supply lists. For others, it means moving abroad due to a lack of opportunities here. Scottish Government figures for 2024-2025 show that out of the 2,294 newly qualified teachers who completed their probation year after university, only 1 in 4 secured a permanent post. Of the remaining 75%, 1,015 are in temporary or fixed-term contracts and 711 are in other roles, mainly supply teaching or not working in teaching at all. Primary teachers are the most affected. Nearly 9 in 10 are temporary, on supply or without a permanent post. Louise Fraser moved to Dubai for job security because she struggled to find stable work in a Scottish primary.
At the time, I was told that permanent jobs were very unlikely for teachers coming out of the probation period. So I could go for the temporary posts or just go into supply. I also applied for the temporary jobs. I spent hours on applications and all councils and just received rejection. So that had a big impact on obviously my mental health. You've done 4 years, hard work, exams, placements at all different schools, and you just cling on to that hope. You send an application out and it just comes back a rejection. I just had emails upon emails, about 20 to 30 rejections just because I wasn't experienced.
And you're coming back, aren't you, to Scotland? How are you feeling about that?
Well, initially coming out here wasn't my choice. As I say, I was sort of driven to come out here because there was no jobs. I miss family. I want to be in Scotland. I want to teach in Scotland and give back to the education system that taught me.
And would you, if you don't get a job, would you have to stay in Dubai or think again?
For me, I would have to look at other career paths. I want to come home and I want to potentially start a family of my own, and I don't want to do that out in Dubai. I want to come back to Scotland, get set up, and if I have to go down different career paths, then I have to.
How does that make you feel as you think about that?
It's heartbreaking.
Now, the Education Secretary, Jenny Gilruth, says she recognises the challenges, but says figures from the last month had shown a rise in teacher numbers of 63, the first increase since 2022.
We do think meeting those demands in terms of the teaching union's expectations on teacher pay was the right thing to do, but it has cost the government in excess of £800 million since 2021. So we recognise that challenge. Teacher numbers across the board since 2014 have increased. They are increasing in the past year alone, thanks to extra funding that we put in last year's budget that was protected for this purpose. And we're working with COSLA on how we can enhance that figure.
Well, earlier I spoke to the General Secretary of the Educational Institute of Scotland, and Andrea Bradley, who gave me her thoughts.
We have regular correspondence from teachers who are limping from one temporary contract to another, and in many cases they've been doing it not just for 1 year or 2 years, but 3, 4, 5, 6, even 7 years after they've qualified, and that's a really, really difficult set of circumstances for those teachers to be in. They don't have security of income, they don't have security of colleagues, and understandably that really impacts them emotionally and psychologically as well as financially, such that some of them are making quite dramatic decisions to leave Scotland, to go elsewhere with their teaching qualification, and teachers actually leaving the profession because they simply cannot sustain a life working under those sorts of conditions.
Is this something that's a recent problem? Has it been over a number of years, or have teachers always struggled to find permanent work?
So there can be peaks and troughs in terms of availability of teachers, but it's been a fairly steady problem, at least since COVID, when schools were under such pressure to keep education going for children and young people over periods of lockdowns and very, very difficult circumstances of COVID. We were calling for more teachers to be employed, and to their credit, the now Scottish Government included in the 2021 manifesto a commitment to recruit 3,500 additional teachers. So that was a good start, but sadly that has not come to fruition, and we've seen quite a lot of stalling.
And while 3 in 4 teachers are struggling to find that permanent position that we've been talking about, it also comes off the back of hearing from teachers who are in posts saying that they're under more pressure and stress in terms of workload.
This is the horrible irony of the situation. While you have tens of thousands of teachers in permanent work, but overworked to the tune of a day and a half a week extra unpaid on average, you have thousands of other teachers who have undertaken their initial teacher education courses, put in all of the effort and sometimes, the financial commitment that it takes to be able to overtake learning like that, and yet they are not able to come and join the workforce and help deal with all of the workload that so many of our teachers are grappling with at the moment.
What can be done? How do we find positions for these teachers who are desperately looking for the work?
The positions are most definitely there, particularly in the secondary sector where we have gaps in a number of subjects. So we have to think about how we're attracting young people into the profession. The Scottish Government, to its credit, has made additional money available to local authorities for the express purpose of recruiting additional teachers, but the real disappointment is that not enough local authorities have used that money for that purpose.
Andrew Bradley, thank you very much for popping in. Well, we've had a big reaction to this story, with many people getting in touch with BBC Scotland Today. One person commented, "So many amazing newly qualified teachers are resorting to jobs out of teaching, having worked so hard to become an educator." B. Hunter in Edinburgh said, "My son's school is comprised of multiple supply staff. It's not great for teaching consistency for the children, and the teachers are often just here for a couple of days." Peter is a head teacher in Edinburgh who says there are hundreds of vacancies across the country, many of them long-term. Dozens of schools have vacancies they have been unable to fill. Thanks for joining us on tonight's News at 7. We have more to come in the programme, including we hear from crime writer Sir Ian Rankin about what he thinks should be done to get more children into reading.
Join me later for a full weather forecast. The week ahead looks unsettled. Low pressure nearby, rain at times, that could be persistent, and then maybe something colder by the weekend. All the details coming up.
Global politics could hit hard again on Scotland's rural communities. President Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on those countries who have stood against his desire to make Greenland a part of the United States. That would be on top of the tariffs already placed on UK exports by the US last year, and that's bad news for big Scottish products like whisky, salmon and textiles. The Prime Minister described the tariff threat as completely wrong, but he played down the idea of retaliation against a close ally.
A trade war is in no one's interest. And my job is always to act in the UK's national interest. That is why yesterday I spoke to President Trump, to European leaders, and to the Secretary General of NATO to find a solution rooted in partnership, facts, and mutual respect.
Well, earlier I spoke to Ron McCracken, who's the executive chairman, at Isle of Harris Distillers. I asked him what impact the threatened tariffs would have on the industry.
It seriously increases the commercial challenge in what is the biggest market for Scotch whisky. It makes it much more difficult to decide how to invest in that market, and given the uncertainty that's created, it really does actually create an inhibition for companies to consider a long-term investment in the United States when they don't really know month to month what tariff background they're going to have to deal with.
The Scotch Whisky Association, they've said that the industry already, Ron, recorded more than 1,000 job losses in the last year alone, losing £20 million a month. Could that just get even worse then if we see tariffs go from this planned 10% to 25%, as been mentioned?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the evidence is there from the previous increase in tariffs 4 or 5 years ago that the impact can be much more significant. And it's compounded, I think, now by the fact that there are so many younger Scotch whisky distilleries, of which ours is one, who are trying to gain traction in the United States. And this sort of tariff increase increases the challenge and, as I've said already, increases the uncertainty associated with any decisions. And so much of the Scotch whisky community is based in rural locations that the direct impact on employment and then on the communities can be quite significant. So we're at a very serious point here.
We hear all the time, Ron, just how important the US market is, what a fan of Scotch Americans are, as we hear it all the time. But just, you know this industry inside and out. Give us a sense of just how important the US market really is from a business perspective for you.
Well, it's the biggest Scotch whisky market by value, and that's been the case for countless years now. I think the kind of population, the diaspora that exists from Scotland in the United States in itself represents a major market for Scotch whisky, but of course the audience for Scotch whisky is much wider. So if you're having difficulty accessing and competing in your major market, or a very, very major market, that's problematic. And it's against a backdrop where internationally, globally, Scotch whisky is having numerous challenges at the moment.
Ron McCracken there speaking to me earlier. Now, the former SNP Chief Executive Peter Murrell is set to appear in court for a second time next month after being charged with embezzlement. Scotland's prosecution service has announced that a preliminary hearing on the case is scheduled to take place at the High Court in Glasgow on Friday the 20th of February. The 61-year-old appeared at Edinburgh Sheriff Court last March following a police investigation into the SNP's funding and finances. He has not yet entered a plea. Let's get a roundup of the stories making the BBC News app in Scotland today. Scientists in Glasgow have discovered a potential treatment to stop growth in liver and bowel cancer. It focuses on genetic faults that allow the disease to hijack a signalling system in the body. A crossbow was fired at a Glasgow house on Sunday evening in what police believe was a targeted attack. It took place in the south side following what police called a disturbance involving youths. Angus Council has apologised after using a swear word to a person who commented on its social media post about roadworks. The response on Facebook had ended with an expletive phrase. Well, for more information on all of these stories, you can scan the QR code on your screen now. It'll take you straight to the BBC Scotland News app, where there is more for you there, including confirmation from the legal team representing NHS Fife nurse Sandy Peggy that they will appeal an employment tribunal ruling. Now, the value of reading is no secret, but with the temptations of technology and screens, is it getting harder to get children into books? Research by the National Literacy Trust has found that just 3 in 10 children say they enjoy reading in their free time, and boys continue to lag behind girls. Well, today, well-known reading ambassadors have been having their say on it, including crime writer Sir Ian Rankin.
I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for reading. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for stories. And like other writers that I know, I grew up in a house that didn't have many books in it. My parents weren't great readers. But I was allowed to read lots of comics. I loved comics. and I was allowed to use the local Carnegie Library. And comics and the Carnegie Library, free access to books, got me interested. And I just loved words, and I loved playing with words, and I loved making up stories and creating little worlds that were very far away from the quite safe world that I grew up in. I was always creative, I always had an imagination, and writing allowed me to use my imagination. So although I was growing up in a wee council semi-detached house in a cul-de-sac in Cardenden, my imagination could take me on a spaceship, it could take me to different time zones, it could take me to different places around the world, and I could write about it. And it was almost like being there. It was as good as being there. So it was escapism. It was a wonderful escapism. But also it leads eventually to empathy, because you're spending so much time in the company of other people, other human beings, who may or may not exist. But it does connect you to the world around you, and it connects you to the wider world. And what we need to do is to get parents and kids to interact, parents to read to their kids to grow up in houses where there's written stuff there. Because if there is, they'll go to it, and they'll look at it, and they'll learn from it, and they'll be excited by it.
Sir Ian Rankin there. Still to come, we'll get the weather with Christopher, but before that, sport time with Jane, who's here. Jane, I don't know if you've got enough time to get through everything that happened this weekend.
There was so much on the go, but I have to say, not great news from a Hearts point of view. A double blow for Derek McInnes's Hearts at the weekend, with the injury to captain Lauren Shankland compounding their Scottish Cup fourth round defeat to Falkirk. Well, Shankland should know in the next 24 hours how serious the hamstring issue is, but one former Tynecastle favourite believes the club can still win their first top flight title since 1960.
They've shown such consistency in the league, 2 defeats. When they've had a defeat, they've always bounced back, so I think Derry's got a strong squad there. You can see the atmosphere at Tynecastle. You can see the anticipation that the supporters have got now, and I think they really believe that they can win the league.
Well, rugby now, and after Glasgow Warriors' first ever win against Saracens, the Scotston side know that they'll take on South Africa-based club Bulls in the last 16 of the European Champions Cup. Edinburgh are away to Leinster. Well, former Scotland scrum half Andy Nicol captained Bath to victory in the competition back in 1998. And I spoke to him earlier to see how highly he rates Glasgow.
Oh, hugely impressed. I mean, it was just incredible, really. You know, to play against Sale, Clermont away from home, and Saracens and Toulouse at home, and win all 4 games with bonus point and 20 out of 20 points, second seeds, just phenomenal. I mean, probably exceeded expectations, to be perfectly honest. But my goodness, they've been brilliant in every game.
Yeah, really laying down a marker on Europe, aren't they, so far? Is there a sense that European success isn't too far away for Franco Smith's side?
Well, you've got to say this is a great opportunity, Jane, because you know, they've beaten 2 former champions in Saracens and Toulouse, and Toulouse are fully stacked, and that was an incredible night at Scotstoun there. And but it's this style of rugby that Glasgow have been winning these games in. They've not just been falling across the line or winning up with a penalty. They're scoring tries from fun and scoring brilliant tries. So, you know, Bordeaux are the only side ranked above us now, and you know, they're the reigning European champions. So you've got to say Glasgow are right in the mix.
How key is Franco Smith to everything that Glasgow are doing and doing well?
Well, he's just an outstanding coach, Jane, and that, you know, he's got great players. That's the key. You've got that chemistry there together. The alchemy is there for Glasgow to be successful. They've got experienced players. They've got players, you know, like Sione Tuipulotu and Hugh Jones that have been around for a while, experienced Lions. You know, and you've got Cummins, you've got Fagersons, you know, Dempsey, Dart. You're just littered with good players. So good coaches need good players, and good players need good coaches. So that alchemy is just there at the moment for Glasgow, and it's you know, they're working very well together.
The Scotland squad is named tomorrow for the Six Nations. While we've got you here, it would be remiss of me not to mention that to you. What are you expecting from Scotland on that front with the players that we have at our disposal?
I mean, I don't expect too many surprises in the squad. I think it's a very settled squad. Maybe some of the younger players that have come through, some of the Edinburgh forwards, for example, might find their way into the squad, but I wouldn't expect there to be any surprises. And then, you know, the Six Nations is really exciting, but Scotland, with the history of what we've done in the last few years, we can't be looking anywhere further than that first game. It's against Italy away from home. We lost there 2 years ago, so it's a tough place to go. Italy are constantly improving. And so, there's real talent in the squad, there's real talent in the coaching team, and but they can only look at that first game. And, it's a big one. Get that, then we can start thinking about what's next.
Finally, Robert McIntyre's PGA Tour season got off to a very solid start at the Sunny Open in Hawaii. A birdie at the last ensured that the Open man finished tied for 4th on 11 under and moved up to 6th in the world rankings. The event was won by Chris Gotterup on 16 under. The American was also last summer's Scottish Open champion.
There was lots to keep you busy, Jane. Thanks very much, as always, Jane. And staying with sport for a moment, and fans could be allowed to buy alcohol at a Scotland match later this year as part of a plan aimed at lifting the booze ban in Scottish football. The SFA have confirmed the trial could take place during one of the friendly matches in March or June ahead of the World Cup. It would see fans being allowed to buy alcohol in the stadium concourse, but the plans don't include fans taking drinks back to their seats. Time to see how the weather is looking now with Christopher. Is it getting a bit milder? You can tell I'm just one of these people desperate for spring already.
No, in fact, could be turning cold into the weekend and next week. Yeah, sorry about that. Let's take a look at some pictures, shall we? Some lovely sunshine around today for some parts of the country, certainly down the spine of Scotland. But towards the west coast, it was rather grey and there were some rather persistent outbreaks of rain, rather cloudy there across the Western Isles. But what's happening? Let me show you. We've got low pressure nearby, and that means things will be unsettled with weather fronts and rain at times. Not raining every day, everywhere, but certainly some wet weather. And then by the end of the week, we're developing these east winds, which will feed in something cooler. But to tomorrow morning, and it's a bit of a cloudy start. There could be some mist and fog around, but it should soon improve. It should brighten up, certainly across central and southern parts. Cloudier further north, and with those southeasterly winds, the northeast will hold on to the cloud, but elsewhere, after that cloudy, damp morning, it should improve to dry and bright with some sunny skies. So this is the picture as we head through Tuesday morning towards lunchtime. You can see something brighter developing for many, still rather chilly in Inverness, elsewhere 7 to 10 Celsius, then turning wet in the southwest. This is midweek, Wednesday, low pressure nearby to the southwest, and you can see the isobars coming in from the southeast there, feeding in outbreaks of rain. And because of that, certainly across parts of the northeast, there is a Met Office yellow warning from midday Wednesday right through to midday Friday, because the rain will be persistent at times. Not raining everywhere every day, but bands of rain coming and going, and the total's just mounting up. Windy as well, the black arrows are indicating wind gusts, best of the sunshine, northwest highlands. Looking further ahead now, this is Thursday. We've still got that set up with the winds coming in off the North Sea, feeding cloud and outbreaks of rain. Wintry across the mountains, really, above 500-600 metres, rain for most. And this is the picture as we head through towards Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Those east winds really developing, feeding in some rather chilly air from as far away as Russia. So it will be quite a cooling trend as we head through Friday and the weekend. A lot of cloud around on Friday with some outbreaks of rain again, anything wintry across the mountains. And you can see that general decline in temperature as we head through to the weekend and next week. So the last week of January could be rather chilly at times. That's the forecast for now.
Gosh, what a start the north and northeast have had weather-wise.
I know, unrelenting.
More weather warnings. It really has been quite the start, hasn't it?
It has.
Thanks very much, as always, for keeping us bang up to date, as you always do. And thanks to you for joining us as well. That is all from the news at 17. Laura Goodwin will be here with you with tomorrow's programme. But until then, enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye from us.